reviews, and he also is a partner and owner at Knack Factory in town. So give him a warm round of applause on his birthday. He's going to be
Oh, thank you. I normally wouldn't read from notes, but I have a really delicious prescription to Ritalin that ran out yesterday, and I love it, and I don't know what I'm doing without it. It's a legal prescription. So I don't know if people remember, but I mean, you wouldn't remember this about me, but I got into the field of quasi sort of marketing and advertising in 2006, and I started going because of the work that I was doing to a lot of tech conferences, and at tech conferences they were talking about authenticity being a new thing. And the reason they were talking about that was because social media had come about, and the importance of knowing that social media sort of came up, and sort of happened, was that it changed our relationship to broadcast messaging. So it was less, it wasn't so much anymore sort of a one-to-many message, but sort of everyone could interact back and forth amongst each other. And I was talking to Colin earlier, and we were laughing that the idea of a company being honest is also sort of a relatively new concept, because in the good old days before the internet, you could just do one thing and then project a message about doing an entirely different thing. I'm Dow Chemical, we make nice things for your home, we really drop napalm on people. And that was just how it worked for a long time. But then the paradigm shifted, and now, so for example, someone can walk into a factory farm with a GoPro camera and show you what your meat actually looks like, and it's a horrifying experience. And the company has to sort of reconcile the reality in which they make that not sort of like, it's like Old McDonald's, because it's not. So I had to go to these conferences, and they were talking about authenticity, and I was like, this is sort of ridiculous, because I came from a restaurant background, and if you know anyone in the restaurant industry, they are chock full of authenticity and honesty. This is where I started working as a dishwasher when I was 12, and these are the people who I learned these skills from. I remember one time I worked at a restaurant where a guy came in, there's a restaurant in Cornish that still exists, which is called Krista's, and you should go to it if you get a chance. But a guy came in, and he got some mussels, and he didn't enjoy his mussels. And it became evident that he had walked into the restaurant wasted. Like, there's no way he could have been that drunk from a couple of drinks. Maybe he could, who knows? People are doing. But then he got another order of mussels to share it with tables around him to prove how bad the mussels were. And Krista asked him to leave and sort of struck his, canceled his bill and just asked him to leave. And it was one of these opportunities in which I saw that not all customers are for you. You don't necessarily want every customer. It's not realistic. And you know what? Fuck some of the customers, because they're actually the worst. Not all customers, please, but some of them are. And so honesty, I think, requires knowing who you are and knowing what you want out of your customer base, out of your client base, out of the people that you're doing business with. And I think vocal, for my business, Knack Factory, I'm a columnist, and I write a pretty left-leaning column. I also have a blog where I talk about things like having a drinking problem, and I talk about things like sort of like emotional conflict. And I'm very honest in a way where maybe I wouldn't necessarily want to know that about someone who I'm doing business with, but we don't necessarily, and my partners are sort of similar. We have very similar values, and we're very outspoken about those values. And I think for a while, especially when we weren't making so much money, we were really scared about being publicly honest about who we are, because we can't afford to not make money just because we want to publicly be ourselves as much as we possibly can. And for example, we just made a video with the ACLU that we sort of volunteered our time for, the ACLU, about the introduction of a religious liberties and freedom bill here in Maine, which is fortunately rescinded. I like to think because of the video we made that that's probably not actually the case. But I think honesty from that perspective can be somewhat difficult when there's something on the line. And it's easy to be not so honest with yourself when you need to make some money. And completely understandably, we have to do sometimes. Another thing I was laughing with Colin about earlier was when we were not making really any money. My wife's a banker, like, I'm 2 paychecks away from being on the street. My partners are breadwinners for their families. Well, one's a single guy still. I don't know how he does it. But the it's cool to be single, but this guy, whatever. But another is a breadwinner for two children and his wife. And we got approached by a company that wanted us to make propaganda videos for fracking. However you feel about fracking, we're not so cool with it. And but it was really enticing. It was it was the most money we ever would have seen from a job at that point. And saying no to that was really frustrating, but it was important to be pressed in that way. See, I have 42 seconds, so I'm going to zoom through. Probably be a minute and 42 seconds, but I don't know why I'm telling you that. So the other piece of honesty that I think it's important to consider is less about being like, this is what we stand for, and more about just sort of intensely being ourselves is, we got into this business because photography, video production, media strategy. That's what my company does. And we got into this business because we like the creative side of that. My video producer worked at ESPN in a sports media place and NBC Sports for 10 years, which is not where you go to be a creative video producer. My partner and photographer, head of the studio at LL Bean for 8 years. Awesome job, not where you go to be the most creative person. And for myself, I worked for a bunch of people, whatever, wasn't able to be as creative as possible. Client work is not always the most creative work that you can do. It's not always an expression of who you are. So what we do a lot of is we create content for free, where we make videos, short documentaries, photo essays, write blog posts, etc., that expresses who we are and shows people what we're capable of doing in a way that our clients otherwise might not know about, and it expands our portfolio accordingly. And it gives us an opportunity to be honest about who we are and what drives us in a way that our client work does not allow for. I think that, I'm done, but I'm going to say one last thing. I think that what scares us the most about being honest or being open and vulnerable is that someone might see who we are, and a lot of times we don't know that yet. So it's really important to try to figure that stuff out. These are things I've been working on for a decade and a half. I think a lot of other people have too. And now that we have a sense of it, have a sense of who we are, have a sense of what we stand for, it's easy to sort of lay ourselves bare and say, hey, come at us, bro. That's it.